Wagwan, Wagwan. Welcome to the DIY Yardie channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. In this video, I'm doing a water pump installation on a 2007 Chevy Impala. This is the actual water pump, and this is the coolant you'll need, and here are the tools, which is a 10 millimeter, 13 millimeter, these are half-inch drive, 15 millimeter, your 15 millimeter ratchet, razor blade scraper, and a pair of pliers. Alright, so jumping into the job, the water pump is on the passenger side of the vehicle. This is the coolant reservoir, so I'm going to remove that first of all, which is held in place by two 10 millimeter bolts on top there. Actually, I'm not 100% sure these are the right bolts because they're kind of loose on the threading, but you know, to how this sits, the bolts actually hold it in place anyway. So you know, but that's what's there. That's why I'm telling you I'm not sure exactly that is the correct bolts that are supposed to be on this reservoir. Anyway, get that loose, move it out of the way, and throughout this job, I'll move things around to get more space to work. This is the fuse cover. That's got two clips, one on each side. So you want to pop those up. You just put your finger on underneath the clips and pull up on it. And that'll pop it. Okay. So after there, you're going to get your ratchet, and this is the 3/8 ratchet, and there's a slot in the tensioner. You get the ratchet in there, and actually use this is like a I'm using this for leverage. It's a half-inch extension with like a socket that fits over the ratchet. You can use a piece of pipe, or if you have a long enough ratchet, you don't really need that. You just, I'm just using it for a little more leverage to release the tension. Alright, so we go ahead and get the belt out of the way. And this water pump, it was leaking really bad, and it doesn't seem like it's been on the car for too long. It looks like a relatively new water pump. Here I'm getting the positive lead on the battery removed. Okay. Which you always want to, take the battery lead loose when you're doing, any major work on the car, especially involving tearing the engine down. You definitely want to, disconnect your power source. Alright, so I'm gonna get that tucked out the way, and that'll also help to create some more space to work also. Okay, here I'm pulling, this is the 13 millimeter. I'm pulling the bracket which holds the power steering pump, power steering high pressure hose, and that's a bracket that's kind of stabilizes it to the engine block. So once you get that out of there, I'm gonna try to move that also, to the side to create some more working space. That little bracket, you can actually spin that around. You can hold that bracket and spin it around towards the body of the car, or away from the engine. Push that to the side like that. So you're trying to create as much space, workspace as possible to where the water pump is. So we're going to go ahead and get the belt out of the way. And the water pump is held in place by, before that, this is the tensioner pulley. Sorry, idle pulley. And that's a 15 millimeter. And going to get that loose and moved out the way. Just trying to create more space to work, basically. You could actually get the water pump out without moving that pulley, but I just try to get as much space it's possible to work. All right, so being that I'm not going to reuse this water pump, it's trash, I wedge, something behind the wheel, all right, and I'm using the same half inch and the socket for leverage. So I wedge that behind the wheel and press out on the wheel. Okay, there's actually a tool that's made for this, but unless you're going to be doing, a couple of jobs like this every week, you'd go ahead and invest in that tool. If not, if you're, you know, really never going to use it again, or maybe once or twice in the life of you owning this car, that's up to you. All right. Now, there are some vehicles with plastic pulleys. If that was a plastic pulley, then you definitely need a tool, the right tool to remove that pulley. But being that this is a metal pulley, I'm good to go with, just wedging with that. That's actually like a old chisel. So I'm going getting these bolts removed. They're 10 millimeters, like I said, and that just these bolts just hold the pulley to the water pump. Once we get these out of the way, then you're going to remove the pulley, and then after, okay, pulley's out the way, and you can see the water pump. It looks relatively new, like it doesn't seem like it's been on the car for a long time, but coolant is pouring out of it. There's something called a weep hole. I don't know if you see that little hole, but once I get it off the car, I'll show you a little more closer shot of it. Um, okay, there are 13 millimeter bolts that hold the water pump in place. But before I pull the water pump, I'm gonna open the drain on the radiator, which is down here to the lower right corner of the radiator, or the bottom corner by the bottom passenger side corner. Okay, so I want to open. This is where the coolant goes in. So I want to remove that cap, so it gives it more air to drain. If the cap is on there and you open, there's an airlock or a vapor lock. It's my makeshift drain container. It's a very expensive drain container. All right. So the cap's off and drain is open, so I'm draining. So now I can go ahead and actually moving some of these electrical wires over to get more working space. You just move them over and put them behind that cover where the coolant goes into. Alright, so now I'm going to go and get all these bolts removed from the water pump. And like I said, they're all the same 13 millimeters. So once you break them all loose, and just take them out of there. The water pump comes off pretty easily. And it's a possibility that whoever installed this water pump might have wedged it to tighten the bolts, and it's a possibility that's where the damage was done to this water pump. Because like I said, you can wedge it like I did to remove remove that wheel, from the water pump. If you're not gonna, if you're replacing the water pump, that's fine to do. But once you're gonna install a new water pump, I would not recommend to wedge to tighten down that wheel onto the water pump, because it could cause damage. Wedging, if you're wedging it, you're actually prying out on the water pump, placing pressure on the bearings. There are bearings in the water pump. it could cause damage. So right here you could just tap it with a hammer to get it off. All the bolts are out. I'm just using this little pry bar just to pry against it. It'll pop right off. There we go. Now if you pay attention, if you look at the water pump, once I bring it up, you'll see the coolant pouring out from a little hole below. See that hole there? All coolant is pouring out of there. That's not supposed to happen. Whenever that happens, the water pump is gone. There's a seal in there that is supposed to keep the coolant in, but it's gone. Okay, so now you have to remove the old gasket. This is where you used your razor blade scraper. I didn't have my razor blade scraper with me, so I'm actually using my pocket knife. Sometimes you have to improvise. Right? It's best to have the proper tools, but you can't let something stop you from getting the job done. You just gotta improvise and keep it going. All right. So you're gonna clean this whole gasket off all the way around on this facing where the water pump is going to be seated, and clean the entire gasket off. Get the surface nice and clean. Double check to make sure it's clean. All right. So now this is a new water pump and gasket. This water pump, I'm just gonna go ahead and install it with the gasket like this, with no kind of glue or no kind of glue or adhesive to hold this gasket in place, because it's a pretty firm gasket. It's not paper or cardboard like some of these other gaskets, where I would recommend that you glue it to the water pump before you install it to make sure it stays in place. This one it's a pretty sturdy gasket. All right, and it's got like a metal and rubber mixture, part rubber, part metal. So it's a pretty durable gasket. All right, so now I got the surface cleaned up. So now I'm reinstalling the water pump and basically doing the reverse of what it was removing the water pump. I'm getting all the bolts back in place. All right, and remember, like I said, these are all 13mm bolts. They're all the same length, so you can't mix them up. Everything is pretty, standard size-wise or length. Okay, so we're going to get all those bolts back in there and get them tightened down. And the leak, the coolant leak, actually made this job pretty messy. It's a mixture of the coolant and the oil, that's on the engine. That mixture kind of makes things really messy to work with. So it'd be a good idea once this job is done to wash the engine down, clean it up nice, and it's hard to work when the engine's like excessive amount of grease or coolant. It makes it harder to work. So now I'm getting checking all the bolts, make sure everything is tight. And you want to, tighten down evenly on all the bolts. Some people use a torque wrench. I've been doing this for a while, so I know, how to do it by feel. So you just want to tighten until you feel it snug, and then you go back over and give each one another little, nudge. Then you're good to go. You don't have to like tighten like you're trying to, say, tighten a wheel onto a car or something like that. Now I got the pulley, water pump pulley back in place, and I'm putting the pulley bolts back in. Now, like I said, I have a trick for tightening these pulley bolts without wedging behind the wheel. I'm still gonna wedge, but not behind the wheel. I'm gonna wedge in front of the wheel. That way I'm not putting any pressure on the bearing. All right. And I should have, um, you know, done the tightening at this point, but I was actually, thinking how to use once I reinstall the belt and the belt is holding the wheel, I'll tighten it up. Here I'm getting my idle pulley back in place. Yeah, so my whole intention was to get the belt back on, and once I get the belt back on, then I'll tighten down, the bolts, or the belt would hold the wheel from spinning. But that didn't work out because everything was soaking wet. So it was just slipping, you know. All right. And also here I go, torquing the idle pulley bolt. And remember, if you find this video helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. Okay? Because the whole intention of making these videos is to help. If you have an intention to do a job like this, you can come and find information here. So, it takes time to make these videos. It takes time to do the editing and uploading to YouTube and all of that. So, just as a, if you would subscribe, it would really help to build my channel and help me, keep me going. All right, it's free to subscribe, no charge. Just at the bottom of the screen to the right, where it shows the name of my channel, you click on there and you'll see subscribe. You just hit the subscribe, no charge. All right. Anyway, now I'm getting my belt back on. Same thing. I have to pull on the tensioner, pull the tensioner, and put the belt back over. And if you have a problem getting the belt back on, because it's a lot of wheels for this belt to go over. If you can't remember the exact way you took it off, you can always Google. It's called the belt diagram. So you'll say 2007 Chevy Impala belt diagram, and it'll pop up on Google. So it shows basically, outlay of how the belt is routed over all the pulleys. All right. So now I'm closing back my drain, and I'm gonna okay, yeah, this is the power steering high pressure hose. I gotta reconnect that to the block. That's also a 13. So you can see that little bracket. It actually has like a little part of it that there's one part where the screw goes through into the block, and then there's another part with it like another little hook that goes into another hole. It's like a kind of like a secure lock to keep that bracket from shaking or shaking loose. So it's basically locked in place right there. All right, so I'll get that tightened. All right, so now I'm gonna tighten down, make sure my bolts are tight on the water pump. So this is where I say I should have done this before I put everything back in place, because by putting everything back in place, I kind of, took away my work area. But, things happen. All right. So I'm actually using the my pry bar here. I'm wedging it between the bolts on the cover of the water pump. You want to put it between two bolts, and you use that to block the water pump from turning. All right. So you see I have my wrench. My wrench is on there. So then I'm gonna put that in between the bolts like that, and you hold the water pump from turning. You press up against the water pump and you torque down. Okay, once you got one done, then you go to another one. Okay, so I'm gonna spin the wheel and do it again. So you want to make sure you get all four in the same way. Alright, so I'm gonna put our reservoir back in place. And the reservoir, it actually has like a little hook down at the bottom that hooks the bottom. So you catch that hook at the bottom, and then you get the top two bolts in place. The bolts actually they're fixed to the car, so all you have to do is put it over and get the nuts on. Alright, got those nuts on, and tighten them down, and you're good to go there. So now I'm going to pour the coolant in. And you want to pour slowly. Make sure you get the system filled up again. Alright, and in filling the system, part of it is you have to bleed the system. So bleeding basically means to get air out of the system. If there's air in the system, the engine won't cool properly. Alright, so I'm reattaching my positive cable. Get that tightened down. And pull the cover and get that covered. That helps to prevent like shorting or arcing if you should set something on the battery by accident. Alright, so if you see this hose here, these are your heater hoses. And what I do is I remove this top hose. Okay, I open the system, and I leave that open. I didn't show it in the video. I forgot to record this part. But basically, you want to leave that top hose open. Use your pliers, remove the clamp, and you pour your coolant in until you notice it starting to pour back out from this line. Okay, it might pour from both the line and from the hose. Okay, which means that's saying then that the system is full. Alright, hope this video was helpful. This is DIY Yardie. Bless up.